I don't use Google Maps in Amsterdam, especially when cycling. If I follow the bicycle directions on Google Maps, it will send me along this road. But I know it's much nicer to cycle here. And while Google will always send me here, it's much better to go this way. It's not that these directions are useless, they'll still get me to where I'm going, but they're rarely the best way to get there, and they're often the least enjoyable route to cycle on. What's most interesting to me, though, is why Google Maps doesn't work very well in Amsterdam. Because it reveals some major differences in the way cities are designed in the Netherlands versus how they're designed in America. Fundamentally, Google Maps is an application for drivers. That's not to say that there are no bicycle-specific features, but it's pretty clear that the people who designed and developed the Google Maps navigation system are based in the US, and they're primarily designing for drivers. In US cities, cars are allowed to go pretty much everywhere. It's pretty rare for a street to be accessible by bicycle, but not allow car traffic. I've had discussions with American traffic engineers where they talk about how great it is for a city to have a street grid, because it means that if any one street is blocked off or has too much car traffic, then drivers can use any of the other streets to get to where they're going. Without even realizing it, they are making several core assumptions: that all streets are for cars, that moving cars is extremely important, and that if you want an efficient transportation system, drivers should be able to go wherever they want. Which is why a major feature of apps like Google Maps is real-time navigation updates to reroute drivers to a different street if it's found to be a few minutes faster. Anybody cycling in a North American city needs to fit into an environment where, at every level, everything is designed to move as many cars as possible. So, I'm not surprised when I open Google Maps in, say, Toronto, and the directions I get for cycling are pretty much the same as the directions I get for driving. Minus the highways, of course. But in Amsterdam and in many other Dutch cities, car traffic is viewed in a fundamentally different way. For one, the transportation system is designed to move as many people as possible rather than moving as many cars as possible, with a much higher priority on more space-efficient methods of travel such as walking, cycling, and public transit. But there is also an acknowledgement that there are many things more important than just transportation. That cities should be healthy, safe, lively, and enjoyable places to be. Cars are loud, polluting, dangerous, and they take up a lot of space, which means that to make a truly great livable city, it is necessary to carefully manage where cars can go and to reduce the number of cars in the city. One of the most important ways that car traffic is managed in Amsterdam is through maps like this one called the Hoofdnet, or main network, that shows the roads in the city that are designed for through traffic by cars. Some roads are designated as Plusnet, which are the roads where car traffic is prioritized. There's slightly more nuance here, and the dotted lines show routes that are not managed by the municipality of Amsterdam, but you get the idea. The city is specifically planned this way so that the majority of car traffic is routed along the roads of this network and away from residential neighborhoods and local shopping streets, as a way to reduce the negative impact of car traffic on the people who live here. In addition to the network for cars, there are also networks that prioritize cycling, public transit, and walking. You might notice that there is very little overlap between the Plusnet for cycling and the Plusnet for cars. This is by design, and it plays a critical role in keeping people safe when cycling. The number one danger for people on bicycles is motor vehicles, which is why cities build protected bicycle lanes. That way, people cycling are separated from car traffic with a curb, a row of parked cars, or sometimes with these stupid plastic sticks. But the Netherlands takes this a step further. Here, cyclists aren't just separated from drivers by curbs, they are fundamentally separated by what routes they take through the city. In Dutch, this is known as Ontvlechten, which translates as unbundling or disentangling. The routes that are taken by people driving have been designed to be separated or disentangled from the routes that are taken by people cycling. The end result is that when you are cycling in the Netherlands, it is very likely that you will be cycling in a place with very, very little car traffic, because most of the cars have been routed somewhere else. It's important to note that this map is not a map of bicycle infrastructure like what you might find in other cities. Instead, this is a subset of the bicycle route map where cycling is prioritized over other forms of transportation. There are still bicycle lanes on the roads of the automobile Hoofdnet, so you can still cycle safely here. But it will almost always be better to cycle along the Plusnet or Hoofdnet for bicycles whenever possible, because these are the routes that are specifically optimized for cycling. For example, priority will be given to bicycles over cars at roundabouts and minor junctions, and whenever possible there will be no traffic lights or stop signs, and there will even be bicycle underpasses at some major roads so that people cycling don't need to slow down for car traffic. Google Maps has no understanding of Plusnet, so it generates cycling directions using the same algorithms as America, which assumes that the routes taken by bicycles will be similar to the routes taken by cars, even if there are better routes available for bicycles. In the Netherlands, the vast majority of streets that are one-way for car traffic allow people to cycle in either direction. In the US or Canada, one-way streets for cars will almost always apply to people cycling as well, unless there is an explicitly designated contraflow bike lane like this one. So Google Maps has the ability to mark a street as having different access for cycling and driving, but in practice, there are lots of streets in their database for the Netherlands that are not properly configured. Which means that Google Maps will often route you back onto a road full of cars rather than sending you the wrong way down a one-way street. But even if the streets are configured correctly, I still find that Google Maps prefers to route bicycles back onto a major street as soon as possible rather than through the residential streets. In the US or Canada, this makes some sense because the arterial roads are wide and straight and optimized for traffic flow, while the smaller streets are very frustrating to cycle on because there are stop signs at every single intersection. It's ridiculous that there are so many stop signs in North America, and yet the majority of cities don't allow cyclists to treat stop signs like a yield sign, but that's a whole other issue. I have a video from the very early days of this channel if you want to hear me rant about stop signs with a significantly worse microphone. There are very, very few stop signs in the Netherlands. At most residential streets, traffic yields to anyone coming from the right. And many minor intersections are raised up like a big speed bump to prevent drivers from going too fast. So when I'm cycling somewhere, the side streets are usually faster and more convenient because I almost never need to stop. But the bicycle routes from Google Maps almost always send me to a car road with lots of traffic lights because in the US, that's still preferable to a side street with a bunch of stop signs. I think another reason why Google Maps prefers to route along the major roads with bike lanes is because in the US, these are usually the safest places to cycle. American roads are very dangerous. They are built like highways and have a lot of car traffic and high speed limits. Even many residential streets are excessively wide, which encourages people to drive fast, which means that it is extremely dangerous to cycle in most American cities, so Google Maps will prioritize roads that have protected bicycle lanes on the assumption that these routes will be safer. And while this may be a great feature for American cities that have dangerous streets and incomplete cycling networks, I actually find that it results in worse routes in the Netherlands because we don't have a cycling safety problem here. Sure, there are some streets that are more comfortable to cycle on than others, but there are no streets that are unsafe to cycle on, certainly nowhere near the level of danger that you'll find on a stroad in the US or Canada. Protected bicycle lanes are great, but they're not always the best place to cycle, because if they're too narrow, they can quickly get crowded, and then there's not enough room to pass people who are cycling slower. But protected bicycle lanes are necessary to protect people cycling on roads with a lot of high-speed car traffic. This is why I argue that bike lanes are not bicycle infrastructure, they're car infrastructure. Because if you don't have a lot of cars, you don't need bike lanes. So in Dutch cities, once you get off of the major roads, there aren't a lot of protected bicycle lanes because there aren't a lot of cars, and so they're not really necessary. But this is only possible if the street is designed to reduce motor vehicle traffic, especially through traffic by cars. Amsterdam has also been removing car parking spots and using that valuable space for much better purposes, which is another way to discourage driving. And they've lowered the citywide default speed limit to 30 kilometers per hour, which makes the streets safer for everyone. These changes have resulted in a significant reduction in car traffic and lower speeds for the few cars that remain. So as a result, Amsterdam has actually been removing protected bicycle lanes from many streets because they're no longer necessary now that there's so little car traffic. But this is not the norm in other countries, so Google Maps prioritizes routing to streets with protected bicycle lanes for safety. Which means that it will send me down this road that is ugly, loud, and has lots of car traffic simply because it has protected bicycle lanes, even though this street, which is much quieter and has a nice view of the river, is only 1 block away. This is where people should be cycling, but a routing algorithm optimized for American cycling would be unlikely to figure this out. This street was recently redesigned and this section was installed that allows people walking and cycling to go through, but not cars. Drivers can still access houses and businesses in the neighborhood, but it is no longer a through street for cars. This concept is called a modal filter, as it allows some modes of transportation through, such as cycling and public transit, but filters out others, and it's the most common method used by Dutch cities to restrict car traffic. Now, this is not exactly a new concept, of course, and it's used in many other cities. Even the Romans used modal filters to keep cart traffic out of pedestrian areas. But Amsterdam regularly installs new modal filters specifically to reduce car traffic in neighborhoods and to make the streets safer. For example, this used to be a street for all traffic, including cars, but a few years ago it was converted into a path for bicycles only. And the extra space was used to build a garden and wide sidewalk with extra room for restaurant seating. The American method for reducing through traffic is to make streets winding and convoluted, which is why American suburban neighborhoods look like this, with all of these twisting patterns. They're specifically designed to be inefficient to drive through as a way to keep through traffic out of the neighborhood and to encourage drivers to take the major roads instead. But since people cycling need to follow the exact same routes as people driving, making neighborhood streets inefficient to drive through makes them even more inefficient to cycle through. And for what it's worth, this kind of street design also makes these neighborhoods inefficient for emergency vehicles as well. A good use of modal filters can significantly reduce car traffic without restricting other modes of travel, and it is so much more enjoyable and less stressful to cycle somewhere where there aren't a lot of cars. When navigating by car, the only important metric is time. People want to get to where they're going as fast as possible, and that means taking the fastest route that is high speed with as little car traffic as possible. So that's what navigation apps like Google Maps optimize for. But navigating by bicycle is very different. Sure, there are times when you just want to cycle to your destination as fast as possible, but even then, there are different elements to consider. For one, bicycles don't get stuck in traffic, so all of the traffic avoiding features for car drivers are useless for people cycling. But the most important differences are safety and comfort. It is usually worth going a few minutes out of your way if it means taking a safer route or a route that has fewer cars. People cycling are also much more likely to want to take a scenic route, even if it adds a few minutes to their trip. When riding a bike, you're not stuck inside of a metal box separated from the rest of the world, so there's a stronger desire to experience the world around you. Sometimes that means taking a detour through a park, but it could also mean going along a shopping street to see if there's anything interesting going on, or to enjoy the seasonal decorations. Or maybe you're riding a racing bicycle and want to take a route optimized for higher speed cycling. But even if you are in a hurry and just want to get there as soon as possible, you'd probably prefer a route with as few stop signs and traffic lights as possible, which isn't necessarily going to be the route selected by an algorithm that is primarily optimized for driving. For cycling in the Netherlands, the absolute best resource is the Fietsersbond Routeplanner, and it's a great example of how directions for bicycles are different from directions for cars. By clicking the More Options, it offers many different routing algorithms. The different route is one that is easy to follow with limited stops that avoids most traffic lights. But there's also an option for the shortest route, as well as routes for race cycling, recreational cycling. There's even a route that will favor the bicycle paths that are prioritized for snow removal by the city. My personal favorite is the car-restricted route, which is called the Autoluur route in Dutch. because it will avoid cars and busy roads as much as possible, and it has the side effect of almost never having any traffic lights along the route, because traffic lights are for cars, not bicycles. The LF route refers to the official long-distance cycling routes in the Netherlands that mostly go through rural areas and are typically used for multi-day cycling trips. You can also cycle using knooppunten with a tool like this one. This is a network of hundreds of numbered junctions across the Netherlands with official routes between them, which is particularly useful when cycling between towns and cities. To plan a route, you select your start point and any destinations along the way, and a list of numbered junctions is generated. Follow the numbers on the signs at each junction in this order, and you'll get to where you're going. The Fietsersbond Routeplanner can prioritize routes that use these numbered junctions as well. And if none of those are what you want, you can specify your own route parameters, which is really useful if your bike is oversized or a special bike for disabilities that may not fit everywhere. But also if you just want to avoid cobblestones or if you want to prefer routes with better lighting at night. These are all great things to have in a cycling journey planner, but they're not relevant to cars, so you'll never see them in an app that's primarily designed for driving. The Fietsersbond used to have an app that was clunky but functional, but as a volunteer organization they weren't able to devote resources to maintaining it. So they replaced it with a third-party app called Toertje, which generates the same good directions. But I find using the app to be really annoying because it's full of useless in-your-face features for tracking recreational rides, so give it a try if you want better bicycle routing than Google Maps, but prepare yourself for an incredibly frustrating experience. I am not the only person who gets annoyed when using this app. So up until now, I've mostly talked about the problems with Google Maps when it comes to cycling, but there is an even more glaring car-centric bias inherent to Google Maps. Look at this map of De Pijp in Amsterdam. What streets jump out at you first? Certainly this one, but then probably this one and maybe these two. But look carefully here. This street, Ferdinand Bolstraat, becomes so small north of Centurbaan that it nearly disappears off the map. And yet this street is where the majority of the shops are and the majority of the people. What's worse is that this street, the Albert Kupstraat, is almost completely invisible. Even though it's the market street and literally the #1 most important street in the entire neighborhood. And what's crazy is that it's even physically wider than most other streets in the neighborhood too. There are several other streets in this neighborhood that are almost completely invisible on Google Maps. And the reason why is because Google Maps doesn't accurately draw the size of the street based on how big it actually is. Instead, streets are drawn bigger based on how important they are for driving. And since it's not permitted to drive on these pedestrian streets, they're almost impossible to see on the map. This street is shown bigger on Google Maps than any other street nearby. And yet, there is almost no reason to be here unless your goal is to drive through the neighborhood without stopping. There are very few useful destinations here compared to neighboring streets, and I think we can all agree that nobody should be wasting their time at the Heineken experience. It's just silly to watch the light go red and see a flood of people walking and cycling out of the street that is almost irrelevant on Google Maps. But this part of the street is even more ridiculous because even at low zoom levels, this intersection looks like it's a dead end and completely useless. When in reality, it's the most lively intersection in the entire area, with a market, a tram line, and an entrance to the metro. Of course, no map can perfectly describe every aspect of an area, so choices have to be made about what features to display. And yet, at almost every opportunity, Google Maps has been designed to show the most car-centric view of the city. Compare the way Google Maps shows this intersection to the way it is shown on the humanitarian layer map of OpenStreetMaps. This makes it much more obvious that this is a wide street with lots of shops and that there is this huge sidewalk area with trees and benches. All of this is nearly invisible on Google Maps because you can't drive here. I also found it really funny that when I looked at my phone to confirm how tiny this street was displayed on Google Maps, it suggested, "Try gas stations." The jokes basically write themselves. I'm sure the Google Maps approach works just fine in American cities where everything is designed around cars and nothing else matters. But when does this go from being a stylistic mapping choice to being factually incorrect or even actively misleading? Google Maps does color commercial areas differently, so you can sometimes guess that an area is mixed use based on the amount of yellow on the map. But it's not a reliable indicator, as they do the same thing for suburban-style strip malls as well. Once you start looking at it, there are so many ways in which Google Maps provides a distorted car-centric view of cities. Like how Google uses historic trip data from other users to predict how long it will take someone to navigate through the metro system and to walk to their destination, which they include in their travel time estimates for public transit, and that's useful. But at the same time, they don't use historical data to show, for example, how long it typically takes to find a parking spot at the given destination when driving, or to show how long people actually wait for a taxi after requesting it in that location instead of the highly optimistic time estimate given by Uber. Which means that the estimated travel times for driving and taking a taxi within cities are underestimated, which will ultimately result in more people taking motor vehicles instead of walking, cycling, or using public transit because, according to Google Maps, they will get there faster by car. When mapping to a location in the center of Amsterdam, Google Maps will always show transit as taking longer than driving, and even says that there is plenty of parking in a place where you should definitely not be driving unless you absolutely have to. Which is part of the reason why, every weekend, there is a long line of cars stretching right through the center of Amsterdam. When the news interviewed some of the drivers as to why they decided to drive, this couple said, "I just typed Centrum into my navigation system," and then said it took them 45 minutes to go 1.7 kilometers. One of the other drivers interviewed said that they were driving in from the Amsterdam Rai Convention Center, which is insane because it's the location of one of the city's best park-and-ride garages, with a direct connection to the city center by metro. Like many cities in Europe, Amsterdam has a park-and-ride system, with parking lots set up around the city specifically designed so that drivers from out of town can park for a reduced rate and transfer to public transit. In America, driving into the center of the city is a perfectly normal thing to do because most US downtowns have more parking spaces than homes. But Google Maps should not be importing this American car-centric bias to a human-scale city when there are much better alternatives available. Google Maps is used by over 2 billion people every month to decide where to go, when to go, and how to get there. And so it becomes the lens through which people view their city, which is why it's important to call out these car-centric biases when we see them. And it's even more important to remember that Google Maps does not represent reality, especially if you don't live in a place like car-centric Silicon Valley. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support this channel so that I can make more videos like this one, then please consider signing up to Nebula at the link in the description. Nebula is a subscription streaming service that is owned and operated by creators, and we're funded by fans, not advertisers, private equity, or venture capitalists. Which is why Nebula can afford to support creators and give them a platform to make the videos they want to make. In fact, Nebula helped me to fund and produce a brand new show called Day Pass. It's like a travel show where I bring you along to explore some great cities while also riding as much public transit as possible. Day Pass will launch before the end of February, so keep an eye out for that. I'm super excited about this new show, and it's a great example of how Nebula allows creators like me to complete projects that wouldn't otherwise be possible. Taking creators to the next level is what Nebula is all about. It's a great deal for viewers too, because when you sign up to Nebula, you not only support this channel and get early access to all of my future videos, you also get access to thousands of videos from over 250 other talented creators, all without any ads or sponsorships. You'll also get access to Nebula Originals, which includes unique shows like Day Pass, but also documentary films and many other videos that are only available on Nebula. It's amazing what can be accomplished when you cut big tech out of the picture. And if you're not quite sure, Nebula now has a 3-day free trial. 3 days isn't enough time to watch all of the great content on Nebula, but we dare you to try. They do have a 2x speed option. Nebula also has gift cards, and my Dutch viewers would be glad to know you can buy them with Ideal. You can even send one to yourself if you just want to try Nebula without using a credit card. So, if you want to support a streaming service with lots of original high-quality videos that's also dedicated to making creators the best that they can be, then consider signing up to Nebula. If you sign up using the link go.nebula.tv/notjustbikes or buy a gift card at gift.nebula.tv/notjustbikes, then you'll support this channel financially and get 50% off an annual subscription. Thanks to everyone who supports this channel on Nebula, on Patreon, or even here on YouTube by watching this video all the way through to the end. I appreciate it.